Hi guys, and welcome to another Hero of the Week. This week's hero is Labour MP Zarah Sultana. Zarah has delivered very powerful speeches in the past and did so again when it came to the report into the Grenfell disaster. The MP for Coventry South raised a very important point, aside from how those who have profited from the construction of the dangerous tower are still able to do so after the fire, but how Grenfell became a representation of class struggle, where poor people were abandoned while heaven and earth were moved in an attempt to save the rich. Have a listen.
I rise today with a heavy heart as we remember the 72 lives lost in the Grenfell Tower fire, an avoidable tragedy fueled by systemic neglect, corporate greed, and an ideology that prioritised profits over people. I begin by sharing the call of Grenfell United for the removal of flammable cladding from buildings now, for sprinklers, for the Hillsborough Law, for speedy criminal prosecutions of those whose negligence, greed and dishonesty killed 72 people. But there is something more here which I urge honourable members to understand. The Grenfell Next of Kin group call this report 10 kilograms of words on pages rather than justice. The anger that Grenfell survivors have expressed is an anger that many of us feel, that in Britain today, working class people are treated as expendable. Less than a year before the fire, the Grenfell Action Group warned their dangerous living conditions would cause a catastrophic event, an incident that results in a serious loss of life. They predicted their own deaths because they knew how little anyone in power cared about keeping them alive. That is the inescapable conclusion of this report. Building firms engaged in systemic dishonesty, that's what the report says, to profit without ensuring safety. Some of them knew their insulation was, and I quote, a raging inferno, but they kept selling it anyway. After the earlier fires at Knowsley and Lakanal, after large-scale tests warned of the dangers of cladding, neither the British government nor Kensington and Chelsea Council came to help the residents of Grenfell. Then, after the fire, a former Secretary of State responsible for housing, Lord Pickles, loudly told the inquiry to not take up too much of his time. Nobody seriously thinks that the residents of London's wealthier streets would be so ignored, so derided, treated with contempt for decades and left to die. So let's tell the truth about the society we all live in. When 2 billionaires drowned on a submarine voyage to see the Titanic, powerful countries united in a global rescue effort. But when poor people and persecuted people drown in the English Channel or burn in Grenfell Tower, we do not mobilise every single resource to save their lives and bring them to safety. That is a kind of class war, a war on exploited and persecuted people wherever in the world they are born. Grenfell Tower was named after Sir Francis Grenfell, a general who carried out colonial violence from Ireland to Sudan to South Africa. When the British ruling class want cheap labour from places like those, it houses workers in an unsafe building named after a man who may have killed their ancestors and then ignores their warnings and leaves them to die.
Well said, so well said. And Zarah has delivered speeches like this in the past, and she hits on so many points here. The fact that the residents of Grenfell were ignored. They said, look, this is dangerous, we need support from the council, we need support from the state, and they were abandoned. And why were they abandoned? Well, it leads into her second point, that they were abandoned because they were poor. They were abandoned because they were working class. You know, when she raised the point about 2 billionaires who went on an adventure and then it was believed got into trouble, heaven and earth was moved in order to try and save those people. But when it came to 72 working class people in a tower, we had the likes of Jacob Rees-Mogg blaming them. Well, they should have used common sense. They should have ignored the fire service. They should have just walked out. Failure after failure. And of course, a lot of hand washing. Nothing to do with us. Move the responsibility onto somebody else. Department just passing it like a ball around, saying nothing to do with us. We're not responsible for that. It was somebody else's fault. And the victims, in many cases still living in accommodation that's unsafe. Because they're working class. Because they have no power. Because they have no influence. This is the problem in politics. The richest in society have power and influence. And that's when we see politicians and countries move heaven and earth to try and rescue them when they get into problems they have created themselves. But when ordinary people are struggling, they're told that they're lazy. They're told that, well, they should have made better choices in life. It's important that there are MPs like Zarah that raise this and point it out. Unfortunately, the chamber here was pretty empty because many MPs just couldn't give a damn. Let me know in the comment section, guys, what you think. As always, your comments are greatly appreciated. Thanks a lot.